Silvia, thank you so much for making time to talk with me today for the Future Social Service Institute newsletter.
Hi, Micaela. It's nice to be here, actually.
That's nice to hear. I want to start this interview by acknowledging that we're meeting on Aboriginal land and pay my respects to Aboriginal people and communities and their elders, past, present, and emerging, and the work that needs to be done by our organisations to re-empower communities to respond to the generations of harm that have been done. It needs to be central, I think, in our minds in terms of the work that we do. Silvia, you've held a number of really significant leadership roles in government, particularly in what was the Department of Health and Human Services and Education and Training, and in the community sector. So you're currently the General Manager, is the title General Manager?
Executive General Manager of
Sorry.
Operations.
Executive General Manager of Operations at Uniting. Prior to that, you were the CEO at Paran Mission. So you've held some very significant leadership roles. And what I'm interested to talk to you about today is you've got some really, I think, unique perspective and understanding. You've held both leadership and oversight roles of some attempts to make transformational change. And we're all kind of learning and keep iterating about how do we do that. So, and you're now in a leadership role in the state's largest community service organisation across that delivers a range of services across the state. So from your experience, I'm interested in your views about what the change management task is, particularly in this extraordinary year in which we're all trying to grapple with what does the future look like now, it's not post-COVID, post-lockdown in Victoria and moving into hybrid scenario. So leadership task and what do you think the principles of change are?
Gosh, it's a big question, isn't it? But hasn't it been a time, I think, when we've all learnt so much about change? I think we all talked about it a lot and we have done for many decades. But I think we've experienced it and we've done it. And so I think that there have been some incredible lessons we've learned about adaptation in the last year that really, at least for me, have changed the way I think about transformation and change, away from a more esoteric idea about how you do it and what all the dimensions of it are and how you project plan it, and much more to making it a grounded experience for people. And so I think for me, that's changed a lot, actually. And my reflections as I look back on where have we succeeded in the past and where have we found it really hard to change things, even if our commitment to doing it was so strong. And so I guess for me, I think about a lot of things and I think a lot about, well, why do you want to do this thing? Like we all talk about change, but I think at the heart of it, if we don't have a really good and compelling reason as to why we want to make that change, then being able to really, infect people's hearts and minds with it and make it an important thing in our everyday, it becomes another thing, but not the thing. And so for me, we talked a lot, with our consumers, and even I guess when you started by saying when you've tried to be involved in this in other places, I think, starting with the consumer experience, the individuals, the families, the communities, that's so important. And what we know, and we've known it for a really long time, is it's really hard for people at that time in their life when something happens and there's hardship, there's a struggle, there's something that's really deeply impacting their ability to move on, and they need at that point some support. We know it's incredibly difficult for them to find it, or they find it, but it comes with a lot of conditions and rules. And or it comes from 5 different places in 10 different ways, and they have to try and negotiate that. And we know that, with disadvantage, the way we're kind of experiencing it in this world, with intergenerational issues, with poverty, and the fact that, we like to think we're not leaving anyone behind, but we are in a significant way. If we don't pay attention to the fact that we've not made it easy for people to get what they need when they need it, that we haven't enabled them to find their strength and their hope and move on, then we're not going to get anywhere in terms of our aspiration for a vibrant, inclusive Victoria, vibrant and inclusive Australia. And so I think listening to people and understanding what they need is really important. And, when I think about COVID, I think the what then becomes important, because if we talk esoterically about pilots and demonstration projects and philosophies and frameworks, people, they don't quite understand, what do you need me to do differently? If I've got to work better and if I've got to achieve this outcome that I think's great, and our people, they're caring, they're compassionate, they're skillful, they've got great relationships, they've got fantastic partnerships, they know a lot, they have a deep understanding, but they need to kind of be given some kind of direction about, what do you need us to do differently and together? And then really practically, and how will we do that? So things like sharing intelligence, information, knowledge, creating tools, those things are really important, because without those really practical things, you can't make what is effectively, in my mind, this seismic change in the way that we work.
When you talk about that, about the change, that is the change that we're seeking from a person-centered, the person seeking the services perspective, what's often talked about is integration, integrated services. What do you think? What does that mean? And what are the barriers? Why has it been so hard to crack that?
Yeah. I think, again, I'd go, so for us, go back to the person. So if it's an individual, a child in out-of-home care, let's just say, removed from many of their anchors in their life, needing to recreate that amongst strangers often, and starting again as a child, the foundations. And what does an integrated, responsive, compassionate and caring response look like for that child is really different to when I think about, for example, a woman in her 50s who finds herself escaping violence, finds herself without financial supports, needing to embark on a future she never imagined she'd need to. So I think, for me, there's some common elements. It's, have you understood the whole of that person, and have you deeply sought to understand their life, and this in the context of their life? And having had that understanding, have you had the curiosity to ask, what are all the things that are impacting you right now? And have you had the boldness to ask, what's your hope? What do you hope? And then, and how can I help right now? What's really important right now? And I think it's the questions we ask. I think it's the mindset we bring. And then I think it's, have we taken everything that we have at our disposal in that moment? All our resources, everything that we know technically, all of our partnerships, what we know exists in a place. COVID's a great example. Using telehealth, if it's not there, how can I get it from somewhere else? And then how do I create something that directly responds to what this person needs at this point in their life to get them over this step and into a different conversation with me next, which is about, and where would you like to go next? Because often, you know, people, when they come and see us, they come with an immediate situation. There's no point talking about what's going to happen in 10 years. There's an immediate situation. But if we don't also go to, and what will we do next, then the hope for the future, the pathway for them, is something that we're not paying attention to.
I think they're fabulous questions, Silvia. And they're the questions that I'd want to be asked if I was in the moment of my need for support. And I really like the focus on what do you need right now, but also the us being bold and curious. Because I think sometimes this sector, we create rules and boxes about what can be delivered to people. My job is to deliver you this service. So I can't ask questions about whether you need this help. That is part of the barriers to that. And I think it will be really important in this moment, because one of the things that we all saw, I think, in COVID, you're right, we learned a lot about what we're able to do, because that being united behind the common purpose of tackling, we were able to achieve all sorts of transformational change that people said wasn't possible. What would be your one, in terms of this year, looking at what's possible in this strange year moment that we find ourselves in, what's your priority thinking about this now?
That we take a step forward. I think we've learnt a lot, and I think we've learnt that some of those barriers that existed before, geographic barriers, barriers about, you know, there are some places where workforce is really difficult or specific roles are difficult to recruit to. I think that we thought there's only a particular way we can engage with our consumers. There aren't other ways we can engage. I think we had all these, I don't know, assumptions that underpinned our work, even though we thought ourselves, I think, terribly liberated. I think we realised after COVID that actually you can turn your model on a dime. You know, it can just happen, and it happens really fast. I think when you have the opportunity that we've had, and the pandemic's been kind of disastrous all over the world, so I don't want to minimise in any way the impact of the pandemic and how destructive it's been and continues to be. But if you don't then make the very most of this to make a better place for community going forward, then I think that's on us. So what I'd like to think is we've learnt a lot. If we leveraged all of that and created something different and kept a hold of what we've learned, then I think it's been a wasted opportunity. And so, you know, as we start to think about what are these new ways of working for us, for our consumers, I think it's going to be resisting going back to normal and really holding a space that says, and what's this new normal and how do we create it with our consumers? How do we actually talk together about what have you liked about this and what haven't you, and what could we do differently together?
And that's a real challenge for us at the moment, given all the pressures that everybody is under, but it's the challenge that we all have to take up. Thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it, Silvia.
It was lovely talking to you, and have a nice rest of the week.
Thank you. Same to you.